the CEO who lost everything and found his soul. There was a time when I thought I had everything: a beautiful home, a loving wife, a successful company. I was the CEO of one of the fastest growing firms in the city. People called me visionary, disciplined, kind, but behind the suit, behind the speeches and the smiles, I was falling apart. It began the way it does for so many quietly. I was exhausted, anxious, unable to sleep. My doctor prescribed something mild just to help you relax, he said. I took one pill at night, then two. Then I needed more just to feel normal. Soon, it wasn't just the pills. A friend introduced me to a new substance. It helps you focus, he said. I felt unstoppable. My productivity soared, my mind raced with ideas, and I told myself I was fine. But what I didn't see was that my body was breaking. My heart pounded for no reason. I'd go 3 nights without sleep. My hands trembled during meetings. The anxiety turned into paranoia. I'd snap at people, forget appointments, lose my temper over nothing. I started mixing substances, uppers to keep me going, downers to slow me down. But denial is powerful. I told myself I was managing it. I told my wife everything was under control. At Catherine, she was patient, gentle, terrified. She'd find empty bottles hidden in drawers, crushed pills in the trash, white powder on my desk. I promised to stop, cry, swear it was over, and then do it again the next night. She watched me disappear piece by piece until there was nothing left of the man she married. The day she left, she didn't yell. She just stood there, her eyes full of tears, and said, "I can't save you if you don't want to be saved." She was right. They staged an intervention, but I was too proud to listen. I told them they were overreacting. A month later, they voted me out of my own company. I was humiliated, and I spiraled deeper. Without it, Catherine, without the company, I had no anchor. It's a disease, a real, medical disease of the brain that rewires your reward system. Eventually, I lost everything: the house, the cars, the friends who couldn't watch me destroy myself. I became homeless. Yes, me, a man who once commanded boardrooms, now slept under bridges. Addiction doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care about your degree, your wealth, or your title. It's a disease, a real, medical disease of the brain that rewires your reward system. I reached a point where I couldn't feel anything anymore, just the need for the next hit. I remember thinking, this is it. I am done. There is nothing left to fight with. I stopped breathing. And in that moment of absolute silence, I felt peace. But the silence didn't last. Someone found me. My body was shutting down. I suffered panic attacks. My skin was gray, my pulse would spike randomly. My liver was failing. I went through waves of withdrawal, cold sweats, tremors, hallucinations. I'd wake up gasping, shaking, vomiting, drenched in fear. One night, after taking a dangerous mix of substances, I collapsed near a bus station. I remember the pavement freezing beneath me, my chest tightening, my vision going black. But God had other plans. A man named Ray, a volunteer for a local outreach program and a recovering addict himself, found me. My pulse was faint. He called an ambulance and rode with me to the ER. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room, hooked to IV fluids, oxygen mask on my face. The doctor told me I'd suffered cardiac arrhythmia and acute respiratory depression. He said if I hadn't been found when I wouldn't have made it another 10 minutes. When I was stable enough, the hospital referred me to a detox center run by a small church group. That's where I met Father Miguel, a quiet man with eyes that saw straight into your soul. He didn't look at me with pity. He said, Jonathan, addiction isn't about weakness, it's about pain. And pain can heal. Detox was hell, medically supervised, but still hell. They gave me small doses of medication to manage the withdrawal, anti-nausea drugs, sleep aids, fluids for dehydration. Still, my body shook uncontrollably. My skin burned, my mind screamed for the drugs. I hallucinated, I cried, I begged for relief. But at Father Miguel and at Ray never left my side. When I finally stabilized, I joined group therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, relapse prevention, trauma counseling. We talked about triggers, about guilt, about forgiveness. I began to understand what addiction really was: not moral failure, but a disease driven by emotional wounds, brain chemistry, and isolation. Slowly, my mind began to clear. My cravings faded from thunder to whispers. I began to help around the church, mopping floors, serving food. And with every small act of service, I felt a tiny piece of my humanity return. One day, Father Miguel asked me, "What do you want to do with this second chance?" I thought for a long time and said, "I want to help others who are where I've been." And so, with the help of the church and a few donations, I started the Second Breath Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping people recovering from substance abuse find housing, medical care, and employment. We partnered with clinics, detox centers, and counselors. We offered both medical and spiritual healing because addiction attacks both the body and the soul. Years passed. I stayed sober not because I was strong, but because I finally learned to surrender. I began speaking at hospitals, prisons, and rehab centers. I told my story openly: the medical, the mental, the spiritual truth of it. I told them how my dopamine system had been hijacked, how my brain stopped making its own joy, how it took years of therapy, nutrition, exercise, and prayer for it to heal, how relapse is not failure, it's part of recovery, and how grace, real, undeserved grace, can rebuild even the most broken person. Years later, during one of my talks, I saw her in the audience at Catherine. She was crying. Afterward, she walked up to me and said, "You look healthy." I smiled and said, "I am, in every way that matters." She whispered, "You found peace." And I told her, "No, peace found me." Now, when I speak to people trapped in addiction, I tell them this: you are not weak, you are not hopeless. What you're fighting is real, it's medical, and it's beatable. Your brain can heal. Your spirit can heal. There are medicines that can help. There are doctors who understand. There are people who will walk with you if you let them. And above all, there is grace waiting quietly at the bottom, ready to lift you back into the light. Because sometimes, the fall is not the end. It's the moment God reaches down to show you that even from the deepest darkness, life can begin again. Soft piano swells. The music lifts as sunlight fills the screen. I was a CEO who lost everything: my company, my marriage, my health. But I gained something greater: faith, purpose, and the unshakable truth that healing, real healing, begins the moment you stop running from your pain and start walking toward grace. Music fades. Screen text appears. Addiction is a disease. Recovery is possible. Reach out. Speak up. Begin again.